Well, good morning or afternoon, everyone. And I have it right at 11 a.m. Pacific time on the button. So we are going to go ahead and get started. My name is Alicia Summers. I am the Director of Research and Evaluation at the Capacity Building Center for Courts. I'm going to be talking you through the topic of our all-call today, which is going to be on the CIP self-assessment. Before we get started, let's make sure that the chat function is working well for everyone. Go ahead and type in your role and your state in the chat box. When you come in the room, I know some of you already have it next to your name. When you enter the room, that's great. It really helps us with tracking purposes, and most of you who know me know how much I like to have data, so this is really useful for us in getting a sense of participation in our constituency groups and all-call. A couple housekeeping things. If you're not speaking, can you go ahead and mute yourself just so we don't have any background noise? We recognize sometimes things occur in the background, and for those who are familiar with me, again, you might hear my dogs barking. I'm working on trying to keep them quiet, but if you can just hit *6 on your phone to mute, or mute on your end of the line if you're not talking, but don't forget that you're welcome to unmute at any time, and I encourage participation as we go throughout the day. You can also type in if you have questions, comments, or other thoughts in the chat box, and it looks like you guys already know how to do all this. We're getting all the information already as part of this. So we're going to go ahead and get started. You can see a little agenda for the day on the left-hand side. We're trying to follow a kind of a standard format with these calls so that you know what to expect. We're going to start with an opportunity for questions. So if anyone has questions from the CIP community, we have Jennifer Rennie on the line, and the rest of us are available. So any questions or thoughts from the field, pressing issues that you'd like addressed. And feel free to unmute your line and jump in. Okay. Well, if you have questions that come up, feel free to plug those into the chat box. We'll address them as we go through. Our topic today is going to be focused on the findings that we have from the self-assessment. We'll have an opportunity for a little open space near the end. And then at the very end, we'll have a little closing and wrap up where we ask you to give us some feedback on how things went today. We're going to go ahead and get started talking a little bit about the self-assessment report. So as part of this, I have a poll for you already. We're going to have a couple polls today. I'm really interested in your feedback. You guys turn in the self-assessment report every year. It has a goal in mind of giving you an opportunity to reflect back on the previous year, look at your different activities, the things activities or programs that you've funded, that you've been engaged with, the trainings that you've participated in, as well as thinking about how you participated in the CFSR, how you've been doing work around some of the Title IV opportunities, and then what your capacity building needs are. So it's really a reflection activity for you to think about what that looks like. We've set it up so that there's an opportunity to get really in depth on the joint project and hearing quality projects since they're the required projects, but also to provide other information because we know that you're engaged in a very large breadth and depth of various projects across the country. So it's an opportunity to be able to reflect on all of these. We take that information to help identify projects in specific areas so we can say, you know, almost all of the states are doing quality legal representation work. What does that look like? So that if you have a question for us in terms of, you know, who else is doing an assessment on quality legal rep, we have information from the self-assessment to help guide those conversations, to help make some of those peer connections. Our goal with this really is to take this and turn it into something useful for you. We've tried to summarize it in a fairly short self-assessment report. Over the years, they have varied. Used to be really detailed. We've tried to make them less so. Our goal today is going to be to let you know what we found from compiling information from the last self-assessment report, as well as give you an opportunity to give us feedback on what that information looks like to you and what would be most helpful to you in thinking this through. So the question in the poll here really is, have you downloaded and read prior self-assessment reports? All of these are available on CIP Share. Some of them get uploaded there later than others. They typically get shared through the listserv, so there's an opportunity to identify them there. For your convenience, I've also put the 2017, 18, and 19 self-assessment reports in there. The 2019 report just got uploaded this morning. For those of you who were at the Judicial Summit, you had a version of this 2019 self-assessment report that was really focused on some of the topical areas that were going to be discussed or that could supplement the discussions at the Judicial Summit. The standard CIP report focuses on all the different topical areas where you've reported information. So this is a combined one that is a little longer. It's 30 pages in total that gives you that summary data from the different topical areas that have been identified all the way through the areas that were identified as most useful for the Judicial Summit. So it's going to give you some variety there. You'll notice there's 3 2017 documents. That is because in 2017, we put together supplemental reports that gave every state a blurb about what they were doing for the joint project and what they were doing for hearing quality. Now, we've recognized that these have changed over time for many of you, or that you're much further in the process than you were there. That's great because we expect these projects to evolve. But before we do this every year, we want to know if those things are useful to you. So one of our questions is, if you've read these reports, it looks like we don't have any no's yet, which is outstanding in my opinion. We also only have about 25% of you participating in the poll. So I don't know about what those other participants and your views of the self-assessment report. But our goal really is to make sure this is useful for you. So these are here if you want to download them in the Files Pod, also available on CIP Share for your information. And we'd love to hear back by the end of this call on what is most helpful to you in thinking this through. So we'll get started with some basic overviews. I'm not going to give you all the data that's in the report. It goes into more detail than I'm going to provide, but the basic structure of it is that it goes over these broad areas of where there is information around different projects in a given topical area. It breaks those down into how people might categorize the topics. So, for example, under a hearing quality project, you might have some that are focused on improvements or interventions and others that are focused on assessment. That would be broken down so you can see who's in the same boat as you in terms of project areas. And then there's a table that lists the states that have identified in specific topical areas. Now, these are the projects in a given topical area. This doesn't count the hearing quality project and the joint project, which have their own separate section of the self-assessment report. This is how many other projects identified throughout the report, how many states we have that are engaged in this. You can see 96% have a data project and a hearing quality project. Everybody has a hearing quality project of some sort, may overlap with the joint project in some ways, but everybody has one. So 96% have at least one, more than one in that topical area. 94% in timeliness or permanency, 91% engagement and participation of parties. And then it starts going down from there. 85% have a quality legal representation project, 74% well-being, 58% on ICWA, and then 47% on preventing sex trafficking and strengthening families. And most of the people, the projects have reduced on trafficking because a lot of people have implemented the pieces that were necessary to implement, so we're seeing less and less over time. This is a pretty standard for the last several years. This is what the data looks like. We've always seen the data projects and then something around hearing quality, timeliness, or quality legal rep near the top with almost every state doing something in that area. And ICWA has traditionally been very close to the bottom in terms of states with projects in that area. And ICWA also includes any tribal collaboration projects. This is fairly consistent in what we've seen over time. We also looked at the data from a broad scale to identify how often CIPs are engaged in specific tasks, and these were specific to topical areas and focuses of the Judicial Summit that might be useful information to share. And what we've seen is that everybody has a hearing quality project. It's required, so it makes sense that everybody would have one. 91% quality legal rep. 79% have court agency shared strategies in the PIP, so thinking about those collaborative efforts that they have. 77% are developing family first judicial training plans. 66% have talked with the agency about Title IV-E funding for legal representation, and 21% the agency offers professional partner training to judges, attorneys, and court personnel. So these are the broad overarching statistics that we want to get through to make sure everybody gets a broad sense of this is what we're seeing nationally. Now, the report digs into all of these, and we're going to give a little bit more detail for each of them as well as we walk through the process. But ultimately, these are your kind of broad view stats of what's going on in the country related to the CIPs. The report breaks that down for you by giving you some additional information. For example, in the hearing quality projects, we have state maps for the different topical areas that are typically just identifying which states are and are not working in certain areas. But because hearing quality is one of the required projects, what we've done is really drill down into that to look and see what different types of hearing quality projects the states have been engaged in. And the report offers you not only this map with some different priority areas or different areas of topics and focus, but also some examples of what we mean by that. So you can see the key at the bottom here have quite a bit of states who are really focused on assessment. So we have the purple, the dark purple is assessment, and then the dark blue is training, and then the green is a quality legal representation project. We fully believe quality legal rep is a component of quality court hearings, and so a lot of people have their main hearing quality project is a combination of the two that's really focused on that aspect of quality legal representation. We also have states that are really early in the process and they're digging deeper, so trying to better understand what's going on or what the need is, as well as some states that have moved past that and they're into an intervention phase where they're trying something new or they're building a bench card or manual. These are kind of, in some ways, artificial categories. And if you're looking at your state and you think, hey, I don't know that my state necessarily fits there, just know we did our best to put them into classifications based on the description you provided in the self-assessment. So to the extent that that description gives us a clear idea of what's going on, we are much better able to identify categories. And again, the purpose of this categorization really is to help you think through this process and think about other states that are doing the work for you, with you, or in the same area so that you can get a better sense of who else is doing assessment, who can I turn to, what information would be most helpful to me for this. So to that end, while we're thinking about this, the hearing quality projects, and I'm going to give you some examples of how we would classify these projects so you can see what's going on around the country. I'm really curious, and I've opened a poll in the top right-hand side of your screen. What information would be most helpful to you about the hearing quality project? So you get a map like this that says, here's what other states are doing. You also get a sense of how many have additional hearing quality projects and what topical areas they might fit into, and a couple examples. But I'm curious, what would you like to know around hearing quality for other states? If you can type your answer in here, I'll go ahead and provide some examples of how we classified some of these. So we have some of these classified as, for example, blue is training. What do we mean by training? So Georgia, one of several states, they're focusing on training as a means to improve the quality of child welfare hearings. They have a multidisciplinary version of the Child Abuse and Neglect Institute, so a multidisciplinary CANI that's taught locally in jurisdictions all over the state. So when they're doing hearing quality work, they're not doing assessment currently where they're doing some sort of court observation. What they're at is kind of an intervention phase, but their intervention is a training where they're doing this around the state. So we have several states that are in a similar capacity that right now their main project is focused on training. We have other states, about a third, that are really focused on assessment, and that's your purple states here. They're in the process of assessing current practice. So the most common form of this is through court observation. And we do have a hearing quality constituency group, and that is the focus, talking about the work that's being done, how we can move that work forward, or answering questions on how to measure specific things. On our last call, we had an interesting conversation around how to measure reasonable effort, but we have an opportunity to talk through some of those. But we have plenty of states that are doing work in this area. Alabama is using a multi-method approach with court observation and surveys of legal professionals. And Delaware is also doing this, and they have a kind of a structured checklist for their hearings. But these are the states that you would want to talk to figure out what are you doing to measure this. And to be honest, we've seen all sorts of methodology around the hearing quality project, from court observation to case file review, surveys, focus groups, different checklists. Everybody has a little bit of a different approach, and some of those are multi-method approaches. We have some really exciting information around that. So I appreciate those that are filling out the poll. This is the type of information we want to be able to use. So this is what I can tell you. This is the information that's in the self-assessment report, but what else are others wanting to know? And it looks like resources, instruments, tools that other people are using. I see a lot of requests for tools and the intervention. So those are things that can help us in framing either whether we want to do something more with the self-assessment report and provide more specific details, or if there are pieces like the joint project or the hearing quality project where we can pull out some details and give that back to you. These are all things that are coming up as part of the constituency group, and you'll notice we have constituency groups for many of our topics as we go through this list of what some of our findings are. And I think these tools are helpful to us to think about what kind of universal products you might need or how we can better disseminate and share what we're learning from those. So I appreciate everyone who is filling out the poll. We've also looked at other topical areas. Now, the presentation today does not make it through every single topical area that we have, but it does focus on a couple of our key topical areas, and the report is available to download to see if you really want to know how many states are working on or what they're working on in specific areas. We did focus on quality legal representation. We had David on the phone, and if people have questions, I've been asked a couple times if I know anything about when we're going to have a requirement for a quality legal representation project. So if there's an answer to that, maybe there's not yet. But I recognize that this is something that is a potential requirement moving forward, having a quality legal representation project. And you can see from the map already from the 2019 fiscal year reporting that the majority of states are already there. They already have some projects in the work. You can also see from the graph, and this is how the data gets reported, we ask people to self-report in discrete categories. Many categories are around assessment, new practice models, law school clinics, or other. We have a ton of people in other. So there's a lot of things going on that are kind of beyond this, and I think that means that we have a nice variety of projects. The quality of legal representation work is also really ripe for doing some robust evaluation work, because it's another area that we have that we just don't have enough research and evaluation. So if you're implementing something in the field, it'd be super helpful to identify ways that you can build in evaluation supports around that and share. I get asked a lot as a lead evaluator for the center how to evaluate these things. So how do you evaluate quality legal representation? What are others doing? The same types of questions that we're seeing in the chat pod up here about the quality court hearings. There's a lot of questions that we have in the field about how do we do this, what can we do, what information do you have, what information can you share, et cetera, around this. So that could be an opportunity to share this in a broader way. We also provided primarily for the Judicial Summit to give people a flavor of the type of work. So when you see the evaluation report, if you don't see your state listed as an example, don't fret. It's not that your state is not doing amazing work. We just pulled out a couple discrete examples to give everyone there a flavor of the types of projects that are going on around the country. and these were ones that were listed with enough detail for us to pull out that level of information. So, for example, in the Quality Legal Representation Project, Michigan conducted an assessment of quality legal rep in 2017. So they talked to the counties about the different pay structure of legal practice and examined the correlations between policies and practices. And from that, they learned that there was a deficit in training requirements for attorneys, and they've been working to develop an online training. So you can see which is nearing done. So they've been working, use that information to identify a need and then move that forward as an opportunity. We have several states that are working with local law clinics to improve legal representation. States like Ohio, New Mexico, who I'm totally biased because I'm doing some work with New Mexico, is currently in the process of implementing and evaluating a multidisciplinary team approach with an attorney, social worker, and parent mentor program that will be implemented early in 2020 and has the resources for a really robust evaluation as part of that. They're willing to do that. So we have these different types of models. And Arizona is also doing work around quality legal representation. They're doing something in the form of an assessment, so which can tie into the hearing quality work and get a little more bang for your buck, doing courtroom observations to focus on both the hearing quality work as well as identifying some variables that can be observed within the court hearings or through a discrete follow-up with case files around the quality of legal representation. I'm going to pause for just a minute and have a question for the group. So we haven't for several years put in all of the different projects that the states were working on for every different topical area. It made for a really cumbersome and giant report. However, in 2017, we provided summaries just around the ones with lots of details, so the joint project and the hearing quality project. I would love your opinion, and you feel free to type it in the chat box, or please unmute yourself and give me a minute to get a drink of water so that you can talk, and let me know what you think in terms of, is that useful to you to have these very specific examples from other states in not all but some discrete categories? And if so, which of those do you think would be most useful to you?
Hi, Alicia. This is Hazel from Nebraska CIP. And I just wanted to say, I think it would be useful. I liked reading what everybody was working on, particularly for the court observation. I think a lot of time that's where a lot of us struggle to really put materials together and identify what we're working on. But if we see, Nebraska's working on judicial engagement of youth and families in the courtroom, and somebody else is interested in doing that, then it would be a much easier outreach to us or to, whatever they're reading and that topic that they're particularly interested in. I also think it's, for us at least, I would be interested in hearing what people are doing for the Quality Legal Representation Project. I would also be interested in knowing or getting some construct definitions of quality legal representation and how you guys are defining that across the U.S., because that's something that I know in our office we have conversations about, how do you actually measure that? How would we go about that? And so hearing what other states are doing, I think is really helpful, at least to me and my office.
Great. Thank you, Hazel. And that's the Kathy from New Jersey. Yes, you like that as well. Anyone else have an opinion, yes or no? Feel free to say no. It's not helpful to you. It's not going to hurt my feelings any, because it just means less work that I have to do in compiling information if everybody says no. However, if everybody says yes, I do think these are things that we can work to achieve. Some of this information would require additional outreach because we ask you for summaries of what you're working on, And sometimes there's a lot of detail and sometimes there's less detail, but we don't typically acquire different tools, and that might be an opportunity for the constituency groups and other peer sharing opportunities to pull together some of those materials in a meaningful way to share. I do see a couple people typing, so it sounds like we might get a little bit more opinions. And it does seem like hearing quality and quality legal representation might be the ways to go. I'm curious if anyone thinks it would be helpful to hear about what the joint projects are and the topical areas and how that's working, because those are not in a discrete category, and we've seen them in very different areas across the board, and how that's working. Would that be useful information as well to be able to identify what these categories of joint projects are? That too, okay. Great. Okay, so looks like my to-do list is getting a little bit longer, but some of these things might be helpful to you. And that's our goal, to make sure that this information is helpful when provided back to you. So you can go through the report and get a better sense of the other projects. In addition to these topical areas, and you probably remember, because you do this every year, we haven't changed them for a while, the topical areas, they're the ones that were reported on the earlier slide: data projects, well-being, parent engagement, timeliness, et cetera. In addition to those, we started asking some more discrete questions about currently available statutes as well as opportunities. So one of the things that we asked in this last round is focusing on the Family First Prevention Services implementation. We asked when states were planning to implement, whether it was a delayed implementation or current implementation, and we had an opportunity to hear from the states around what that looked like. This map illustrates to you, and my color coding is off when I pasted it. That orange box there should be the 2020 instead of green. Sorry about that. Take out your 2019, 2020, and 2021 states, and some states that did not know. I should always remember that it changes the source formatting in PowerPoint. But just so you know, that's how the states are. Arizona's 2021. So the color coding actually might be off on this chart where I cut and pasted it. Apologies. It'll be correct in the data report because it has a different illustration there. So in the report, you should get a sense, but it'll tell you the states that are, based on the information we got in the self-assessment, when people are planning on implementing it. And some of them, the answer was, we don't know. So then we have an opportunity to go back and assess that later. But just to give you a sense of where you fall in the broad spectrum of implementation of the components of this. Okay. We also asked questions around the state's involvement in CFSR and PIPS planning. And this is something I think you guys have seen before. We talked about it earlier this year when we were talking about PIP involvement and what that looks like. I know the majority of states now have an approved PIPS. I think the number was 38, but I heard another one. So now I think we're at 39 or 40 right now have approved PIPS in terms of moving forward. But we asked how the states were, the CIPs were involved, and that also ran the scale. But it looks like almost all the states had an opportunity to make suggestions for inclusions in the PIPS, or we're planning to meet, ongoing with the Child Welfare Agency to monitor that implementation and move the work forward. So we saw a high level of involvement in the majority of the states in doing the work with the PIPS. And that's really reflected in some of the analysis that have been done of the program improvement plans that where we get a chance to go in and look at the legal judicial strategies, and we're able to see that. And that is also a question that we asked of you in thinking this through, we ask whether the current version of the PIP includes these various components. And these were only for the states when you reported last year that had already been engaged in your PIP, which was not everyone. And so out of the ones that did have these components, we saw that almost 80% had a court agency shared strategy, 74% had a court agency, your joint project became part of the PIP, 68% had court strategies, 43% had the CIP hearing quality project as a component of the PIP, 42% had specific practice changes that the judge would make, and 38% had specific practice changes that the attorneys would make. So we are seeing an increase, and a significant increase in the last several years, of legal and judicial strategies, and in particular strategies that have specific tasks for judges and attorneys as part of this process. I think that demonstrates a real shift in the field, and we're excited to see that as part of these ongoing and collaborative efforts to move the work forward. We also asked a question about Title IV-E partner training. So the question about whether the agency offers professional partner training for the court and legal persons, so judges, attorneys, court staff, anyone. Right now we had 10 states that said yes to this, that currently offer professional partner training. And of the states who did not, 52% have had conversations with the agency. So around half have started those conversations and trying to identify ways to maximize this opportunity for the agency to have trainings which were sufficient, which were available and offered to the court and legal and judicial folks. And then we asked about Title IV-E funds for legal representation. Now, this is a little different. There is, for the conversations around the previous slide, so that when we ask about the Title IV-E partner training, the report does provide, list out all 10 states that said yes, that they do this, and it has information around what they're currently doing. So you can see kind of the breadth and depth of that in the different states that currently offer this. And this is provided to you within the report, so you get a good sense of what those look like, but you also know who your peers are out there who are doing this or who've had success at this. So if there's an opportunity and you're interested in learning more from them about what they did to make this successful or to move it forward, they are all listed out for you with information about what they do. So that should be helpful in thinking that through. This is one of those places we thought examples would be very appropriate. And then again, for the Title IV-E funds for legal representation. You can see from these, 75% of the CIPs have talked to the agency about this, and 38% the agency is planning to seek reimbursement. These numbers are from last year, from earlier this year, so we definitely might see some additions to this in our next round of reporting, but currently right now, these are where our numbers are. And we do have a list in the document of the CIPs that reported that the agency is planning to seek reimbursement. So we provide not only the list of the states, but their responses to that question to give you a general sense of where they are in the process and what's been done. Again, the information that we provide to you is only as good as the information we get. And so you'll be able to tell some of this is very succinct in terms of, yes, we're doing this, and others might have a lot more detail with a lot of information about the process and what's gone into here. Either way, they both give you an opportunity to start thinking through who's done this, who's been successful, who would your peer people be that you could outreach to learn a little bit more about this, and give you some ideas of the ways that they went about this process, who they met with, and how this process came about. So for those who are interested in this, you get a better opportunity to really dig into what was done and what they've learned. Any questions so far? All right. Final section of your self-assessment, we are really asking you about your capabilities, your skills, your knowledge, your ability to implement the change management process in a meaningful and successful way. And that is really, one, for your own reflection, but two, to help us think about how we can best help build capacity in the field and where the efforts need to be. So I have a couple polls out here for you. If you'll start with the ones at the top, this is going to be really important to get your feedback here because it could frame our direction on what this needs to look like in going forward. So we recognized from the information, one of the questions we ask is there a phase in the change management process where you feel like you need the most assistance? And some of the states said, nope, we've got it all down. We don't need help in any area. And some states said we could still use help in all of the areas. And so we reported on the most common ones. So if you said all 5 phases, then they all got a little hash mark, and we divided those up into how many responses we got. So you can get a better sense of where the CIPs indicated that they need the most assistance. So this graph on the left, you can see phase 5, kind of across the board. The number was 51%. So slightly over half of the CIPs that responded that they could use some additional assistance or that they struggled with this said that they really struggle with monitoring and evaluating implementation of projects. And I think this included, based on responses later, how do we evaluate our trainings? How do we evaluate the work? How do we monitor something that we've done? So this came up as a big issue. So my first question over here on the left in the top poll is what types of products or services would be most beneficial to you to enhance your capacity around evaluation? So think about what it is that you think that you need related to evaluation. So phase 5, monitoring and evaluation. What do you think that that would look like for you? So be thinking about that, and please respond. These are things that we're taking into consideration. We already have some ideas in the works about how to help build this. The challenge with phase 5 is evaluation. There are some things that we could do for sure to build capacity around knowledge and skills of understanding evaluation or tool development, but evaluation itself is fairly complex. It has lots of moving parts, including the evaluation design, tool development, then you have to do data collection and then data analysis and then reporting, lots of parts. And so training someone to be an evaluator is a little beyond the scope of what we're doing with the Capacity Building Center, but we do have an opportunity to try to build capacities in any of those areas that we think would be most useful. So we love your feedback there. We also asked as an additional question if you have any topical requests. So is there any topic, practice, anything that you would like to see more from us on or that we would like to be a focus of some of our work? Now, there were different responses for this. Several of the responses were kind of individualized, tailored to the CIP, and those are things that your liaison, if they haven't already, will be outreaching to you to see how you can get that individual help in a certain area. But any place that we had 3 or more states identified, we included here. You can see still need some assistance around developing effective training, facilitation skills, data visualization and reporting, evaluation generally, which I'm going to lump back over into phase 5 of the other one. Quality of legal representation. Remember those responses were around sharing of models or understanding how to measure. So multiple things. Can you share the different models that are out there? Can we get a sense of training on what that looks like? As someone mentioned on the call earlier, these constructs, can we get a sense of what the constructs around quality legal representation are? All of those were kind of lumped into quality of legal representation. Training evaluation. We did hold 3 workshops on training evaluation, and we recognized it was one of the things that we had a high response and turnout for all of the workshops. We are working on developing a universal product from our own experiences of doing that might be helpful in this regard, but we recognize it's one of the highest in terms of expressed needs. And then 13 said data collection and analysis. So we recognize, again, that data is another one of those big issues. And teaching data analysis is another one of those fun and challenging topics that's kind of hard. It's hard to build capacity in that area. There are definitely ways that we can do it, but we're open to your creativity. So the poll on the right gives you an opportunity to tell us what we can do to help increase your understanding of data. Because this has come up for multiple years in a row, this question around, I don't know what to do with my data. How do I collect it? How do I analyze it? How do I report it in a user-friendly way? These come up, and there's definitely some things that we can do around that. We want to know if there are creative and exciting ideas that you have around what we can do to improve that. Let's take a minute and think about these polls. These are the areas that you identified as the highest need, and so we want to be responsive to that. We're very open to trying to do something that provides an opportunity to increase capacity building, knowledge, and skills in any of these areas, and we're working internally to come up with a plan around that. So your input at this point is an ideal time for us to think through if there's something that we can do. And in the same regard, on this page, there's a poll in the bottom left about if you have any ideas how we can improve the self-assessment. So the self-assessment report. I would love it to be a useful document. It does seem like people do download it and find it useful. Any way that we can make it more useful, I am open to. I don't like doing reports that just sit on shelves. I want them to have meaningful, useful value out to the field, so your ideas are most appreciated. So if you have any thoughts, please drop them in that box. What questions do you have for me about the overview of findings from the self-assessment report? I can say in regard to some of your feedback here that I'm seeing around understanding of data and stuff around evaluation. Thank you for the comment that the training was exceptional. Love that word. That's great to hear. We are hoping to continue our workshops this year. Our first one we're hoping to have is going to be focused around adoption. And states that are doing work in improving adoption rates and improving time to adoption. Part of that is really going to be digging deeper into your data. We're in the process of putting together some universal products, so kind of a data report that helps you think about your data in a meaningful way and think about and design tools to collect additional data. So it's trying really hard to get at some of these data needs and thinking through those early phases of the process of how do we know what our need is, how do we dig deeper, how do we get to that part where we identify and implement an intervention to implement. We're also hoping to hold additional workshops a little later. One that we've talked about a couple times that we're really hopeful for, and the constituency group is really contributing to this, is a hearing quality workshop. And it is going to have a little bit different focus. Instead of that broad overview introductory that we've done in the past to the content, it's still going to be change management focused, but it's really going to be moving into that phase 5, or how do you use this to build evidence in the field. So something around how we take the workshop information, how we take the hearing quality data that you have, how you take the hearing quality project that you have and elevate it to where it can be a robust evaluation of practice related to outcomes in your state. So we're hopeful to be able to have some topics like this that we can use. So we're also hopeful to maximize our all calls and our constituency groups to train on these same topics. I'm going to give you guys a little bit more opportunity if you'd like to fill out the poll. That's the end of the conversation around the self-assessment report for today. And at the end of our calls, we do like to take a little bit of time for open space. This is free-range categories, whatever you'd like to bring up or talk about. If you have any reflections on what we've just talked about, brilliant ideas you want to share, or any questions that you have that have come up throughout the course of the day, now would be an excellent opportunity to share those. Is there any news on when there will be a program instruction on quality legal representation? I will defer to David.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, the only news I have is that there will be, but likely not until 2021. So you'll have continued time to think about what you'd like to work on, maybe even pilot a bit, but the new requirement will correspond to the next reauthorization, and we are currently reauthorized through 2021. So the new requirement will occur a ways off yet in the future. But
Thank
would really
you, David.
encourage folks to think about it, start thinking about it now.
And what I heard from that is now's a great time to collect your baseline data on what practice looks like before you do a quality legal rep intervention so you can demonstrate positive change in the field.
Absolutely.
I'm sure all of the rest of you heard that as well.
And Alicia, I'll pause a bit longer to make sure we don't have any other questions or comments, but I would like to say a word or two before we wrap up.
Absolutely. Do we have other comments or questions? We do have a little bit more time. Is there a template we could use to collect our baseline quality legal representation data? That's a great question, Kim. I don't think we have a kind of nationally shared template on quality legal representation. However, I don't think it's beyond the realm of possibilities to work with the states that are already collecting data around this and see if we can get a compilation of tools and potentially suggest or offer some examples of what that could look like. Another book for template. We'll add that to our list and see what we can do. Any other questions? I think, David, you have the floor. No one leave. There's another screen with our traditional end of the call poll that we want you to get to, but since I want you to be able to listen to David, I'll switch that over here in just a minute.
Thanks. I just wanted to wish everyone a nice holiday. I hope you're able to take some time to be with your families and let you know how truly grateful and thankful I am for all the work that you do and the opportunity to work with you. We've had a couple pretty significant losses in the CIP community in just the last few weeks, and I wanted to make sure everyone was aware. Anne-Marie Lancourt from the American Bar Association Center on the Children of Law passed away quite recently. She was the director of state projects there and worked for a number of years with Pennsylvania and Wyoming in particular, but was also involved in Oklahoma and a number of other states, was really one of the main architects of their trial skills training for child welfare law and just an overall kind and wonderful human being. And she passed away just a couple of weeks ago. And then also, just this past weekend, Chief Justice Katie of the Iowa Supreme Court also passed away quite unexpectedly. And many, if not most of you, would have had a chance to hear him speak at the National Judicial Summit. He was the president of the Conference of Chief Justices at NCSC, as well as being on the Supreme Court in Iowa. And he both opened and closed the summit, and I know I was quite moved by his closing remarks. So extend our condolences from the Children's Bureau to both Iowa and the ABA. And again, hope you all have a very wonderful holiday. Thanks.
Thank you, David. Okay, we are nearing the end of our time. You have a few minutes here. We'd like to hear how useful this call was to you. And if you didn't rate it as a 5 or above and you have suggestions on what we can do to make this a more useful call for you, we'd love to hear those. Again, our goal is really trying to make sure that this provides useful feedback to you. If you haven't downloaded the self-assessment reports and you're interested in those, they've popped up again in the file box on the right-hand side of the screen. They're also available in CIP Share for your download at your leisure when you'd like to check those out. So please feel free to do that. And just so you know, our next all call, December 17th, 2019, and the topic is going to be on tools to increase family voice in court. I believe that's a preliminary, nearly confirmed topic about what we're going to have on our next all call, so everyone has a sense of what is coming up down the pike. Thank you, everyone, for your participation today. We appreciate you providing us this useful feedback and joining us for the call today. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day and enjoy your upcoming holidays.